Wakatanka Dakunitawa Tankayaka Ota Mahpiyaki Eya Nakecha Makaki He Duowancha Mini Owancha Shbeya Wankechi Hena Oyaki.
Hi, my name is Denzel Belin, and I'm a member of the Art Hounds team here at MPR News. Together with APM Research Labs, we are happy to bring you Arts and Artists in Minnesota, diversity, data, and discussion. First up, a conversation with myself and a member of the APM Research Labs team, Ben Clary. So, Benjamin, tell me more what you do for the APM Research Labs.
Sure. So I am a research analyst for the APM Research Lab. I've been with the team for the last 2.5 years and do a wide range of things, looking at opinion surveys, writing up results, analyzing both quantitative and qualitative research to reflect on important issues that are happening in the world.
That's great. And I know that you led this Minnesota Diverse Community Survey, correct?
That's right. So the APM Research Lab partnered with MPR News, other external funders who generously supported this work. And last spring and summer, we fielded a survey called the Minnesota's Diverse Communities Survey. And really at the heart of that was the chance to listen. And so what I mean by that is the survey itself started with listening sessions that were put on and organized by NPR's community engagement team. And it was among BIPOC Minnesotans throughout the state. And so we took a lot of what came out of those listening sessions, important issues, concerns, things that were going well, things that communities wanted the rest of the state to know about them, and use that as the basis for the survey. And then as we were developing questions in the survey instrument, we went back to some of those participants and other community stakeholders and got further feedback that helped us refine and put into the field the best survey that we could. And one of the unique things about this survey was the chance to really focus on a number of diverse communities throughout Minnesota. So instead of just having BIPOC as a category or just all Minnesotans, we were able to actually get scientifically representative samples of six different racial and ethnic communities within the state.
So yeah, we're here to talk about arts and culture. And this intersection between my world and Art Hounds, your world as research. So what did your research have to say in that realm of arts and culture?
We asked a couple of questions about arts and culture, and really the good news is that Minnesotans by and large feel really positively about the cultural amenities in the state of Minnesota. So over 2/3 of all Minnesotans positively rated the cultural amenities in the state, actually close to 3/4. And that held true for BIPOC Minnesotans as well as white Minnesotans. So a little over 2/3 of BIPOC Minnesotans also positively rated cultural amenities in the state. And white Minnesotans were a little bit closer to that 3/4 mark, but really not a huge gap, which was really great to see. The other thing that was positive is that Minnesotans regularly take advantage of the state's arts and culture offerings. So 1/4 say that they take advantage of art and culture in the state more than once a month, which is really great to see.
Now, I know you had talked a lot about, seeing some similarities between white communities and BIPOC communities. Were there any sort of like key differences that you noticed?
We wanted to get an overall impression about how do you feel about the state's cultural amenities, how do you feel about the state's arts offerings, but we also wanted to see if people felt like they were represented in the cultural offerings of the state of Minnesota. And the unfortunate thing is that that's really where we see a lot of the differences. So overall, over 2/3 of all Minnesotans feel like the state's cultural amenities represent their particular heritage and culture well or very well. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to BIPOC Minnesotans, for almost all groups, it was less than half said that they felt that they were well or very well represented. The one difference, the one exception to that is Hmong Minnesotans, who actually felt closer to that overall number of over 2/3, approaching 3/4, who felt that their culture was well represented.
Could you speak more to like what sort of particular points led to those differences?
Yes, one of the most interesting data points for me, at least, was when we cross-referenced the data by age and race. So in general, close to 1/3 of all younger adult Minnesotans, so between the ages of 18 and 29, had a negative rating of the state's cultural amenities, which is the largest group when comparing across other age groups. That was the largest proportion that had a negative rating of the state's arts and culture offerings. However, BIPOC Minnesotans in that younger adult age group were far more likely to give a positive rating than their white peers. I think the other thing that piggybacks off of that is that representation was a huge issue for younger Minnesotans. And what I mean by that is when we broke down data by age and race, we saw that close to 90% of younger white Minnesotans between the ages of 18 and 29 felt that the state's cultural amenities represented their own heritage and culture well. However, when we looked at BIPOC Minnesotans, it was roughly 2 in 5. So only 40% of younger BIPOC Minnesotans felt that their heritage and culture was represented in the state's arts and culture offerings. So just some really, I think, significant and important issues to look at. And it's not just a matter of kind of one identity, but looking at multiple intersections and how that really impacts what we hear from the data, hear from the respondents.
Were there any other data points that surprised you?
So one of the things we heard from the listening sessions that happened from the community engagement team was that coverage is often of BIPOC communities in Minnesota is often about negative things. Communities are approached when something negative happens, and that reflects in the coverage, just overall more negative coverage. And the respondents or the participants in the listening session said, we really want to be able to focus on positive things too. There are great things happening in our communities. So we asked an open-ended question about what is the single most positive thing happening in your community right now. And overall, arts and culture did not rank highly when looking at all Minnesotans, because there were other things like COVID that took much higher precedence. And that makes sense given when the survey was fielded. But when it came to Hmong Minnesotans, Indigenous, and Latino Minnesotans, they all had arts and culture as the single highest category of response.
Now, I know that I am ready to dive deeper into this information, just look at it in a little bit more depth. Where can we find more about this arts and culture section of the survey and more about the survey at large?
Sure. So you can go to our website, www.apmresearchlab.org. We have a landing page for the Minnesota Diverse Community Survey. You can find all of our reports, links to additional coverage from MPR News, all of the reports that we've done breaking down the survey in terms of policing, criminal justice, arts and culture, inclusion, education, media. It's all there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Denzel.
As a way of diving deeper, looking into this intersection, I had the pleasure of speaking with 8 BIPOC artists in the Minnesota region. Here they are.
Hi, my name is Mei Li Yang. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I identify as a writer, performer, educator. If you ever see me on stage performing, I'm usually playing a version of myself, which is why I don't say I'm an actor. And I think I forgot to mention another title because it's kind of a new title, but I'm a filmmaker these days.
Hello, my relatives. It's with a good heart I greet all of you with a handshake. In English, my name is Autumn Cavender. In Dakota, my name is Wichach Biyotanwi. I am Wachbetu in Dakota from a place that we call Pejuta Zizik Abimokochi, or the land where they dig for the yellow medicine, BIA name Upper Sioux Community. I'm actually a traditionally trained Dakota quill worker, so trained through the like traditional apprenticeship models.
My name is Dae Yang, but I go by Dae. And I am an actor, playwright, and teaching artist. Ooh, scary, but yeah.
My name is Tung Crystal, and I'm the artistic director of Theater Moo, an Asian American theater company in the Twin Cities, and also an actor, singer, and director.
Yeah, so my name is Lue Thao. For me, my art is dancing, so I specialize in break dancing. So right now, being a studio owner as well as a dancer.
Fresh, my name is Tish Jones. I am a poet, MC, and I'm also the founding executive director of True Art Speaks, as well as a cultural producer and organizer.
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Ang pangalan ko is Marianne Quiroz. Beautiful day to all of you. My name is Marianne Quiroz. Filipina immigrant, Indigenous, Mama, Islander, and just leveled up on my status and received my grandmother status, so my matriarchness is coming out.
Nanotoka Sergio Quiroz. I am a culture bearer. I teach dance, drumming, and Nawa culture here in the Twin Cities.
I asked them all the same 3 questions. The first question dealt with the past, how they got to where they are now as artists.
When I was in 6th grade, I grew up in the 90s, and there were a lot of gang activity in the 90s, right? Especially for Hmong folks. My parents wouldn't let me and my brothers go out and do anything. So I was stuck at home, I started watching a lot of TV. I played a lot of video games, and I read a lot of books. And that was my entree into art making, just living through stories. And, I think a year after I started reading, I started writing and started imagining what it would be like if I could create my own work. And so I talked about all the genres in which I write. I mean, originally I wanted to write mystery suspense thrillers because that's what I read. And when I was 18, I met a bunch of Hmong writers who challenged, supported, encouraged me to think about writing stories, my own stories as a Hmong person. And that's how I started writing creative nonfiction.
Growing up Dakota, all of my cousins tried to teach me how to bead. A lot of them tried to teach me all of these traditional skills. And, those poor dears, they tried so hard to teach me, and I was the most terrible student. And so they kind of all but given up on me. And it was actually through my work as a midwife. So I'm a home birth midwife, and I'm a birth worker, and I've been doing that since the fall of 2008. And it was through the revitalization of Indigenous birth practices more broadly and Dakota birth practices more specifically that I realized that there were so many different items that needed to be made in anticipation of the arrival of a new baby. And not a lot of people who I knew or interacted with knew how to make them. And so I kind of embarked on this journey, especially when I got pregnant with my first child, to learn how to make all of these items, and to figure out how they were all constructed and how they were all embellished, and not just designs that looked Dakota or that were aesthetically pretty, but to really imbibe meaning, to tell story within the context of the images that I was putting on the items that would later be worn by my son.
I'm Hmong, and in the Hmong culture, storytelling is a huge thing. And growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, and she told me a lot of stories, in like character voices, and we would reenact like the little ghost girl hanging under a big leaf in the forest, and I'd force my siblings to play roles with me. So I feel like it was always instilled in me, like this art of wanting to create something, storytelling, and bringing like our culture to life and seeing it happen in front of me, since obviously I grew up in America, so I don't know the full length of what my culture encapsulates.
The draw for me actually was Rapunzel. It was a theater piece that our science teacher had invited us to perform as a group of folks who would, typically like get our work done early during the school day and just, be kind of squirrely. And the majority of the cats didn't want to do Rapunzel. They were like, nah, we want to do this murder mystery joint. And so the deal was that I would get a free copy of Rapunzel to read on my own if I, stayed the course and did the murder mystery with the rest of the crew. So anyway, I did that. And, that was a joint. That was the first time I had seen, hip hop theater, right? And what could have been hip hop theater. I don't know who wrote that. I don't know if, the person who wrote Rapunzel was a hip hop practitioner. I never looked into it or whatever, but that was like, oh, okay, so the stuff that I do at home with my family and with the friends, with my crew, is something that I can do in these other spaces. It doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean? It can be a part of my academic career. It can be a part of, like this, again, like extracurricular sort of activity space that I'm doing.
In the Philippines, as a young girl, as a little girl, my mom actually enrolled us in community classes. So I took ballet and traditional dance. And my grandmother, my Lola Esther, was actually one of the Filipino dancers here when the Filipino cultural groups just started in the 80s here in Minnesota. And so she was one of the dancers here before we even immigrated here, my family. And so for me, I feel like dancing is in my genes, it's in my DNA, it's what the ancestors have passed down to me. And the beautiful part about it is I love all forms of dance. There isn't any dance or movement where I feel like, oh, that feels, even if I don't do it correctly or don't do it well, I just love moving my body, and I feel like when I move my body, I'm connected to the earth.
Here's a piece provided to us by Cypher Side Dance School and Studio. The second question dealt with the present. Where are they now? And how does that relate not only to their personal communities, but to the conversation of arts at large?
There have been some moments where I was told, I don't think I was supposed to be told, but I was told that like I got a role over another person because I looked more Asian. And so it made me go, did I get this role because you need an Asian person and I fit it, or was because of my talent? Did I deliver on it? And I feel like I'm starting to fight a lot with that. I guess just I don't even know what you would call that, but fight the like you can't just be something we say a lot in this circle of theater friends I have that are Asian American, specifically Hmong American. You can't be okay, you have to be great to succeed in doing anything. Like, it's not just theater, it's anything you do. And maybe it's also, the Asian mindset, but I don't think we're the only minorities that agree with this, but it's like, you cannot be okay, you have to be great. And then you try your best to be great, and then you get casted for these things, and then you hear later it's because you just looked the part. Kind of feels like. And then it goes, but then you got work. But then you got the job. And theater is all about networking. But then you got to meet that person that met that person that led you to that person, and that's why you got this job, or you got an offer to audition for this job.
In terms of philanthropy, we're in this moment where, the philanthropy is aware of how important artists are in this work, in change work, and how necessary artists are. And there's all this money being, distributed to different communities, different arts organizations, different individual artists for project-based things, and different aspects of DEI work or artist disruption work, and so on and so forth. And I think my biggest thing I want to encourage artists to do as part of that disruptive work is your creative practice. It's not just, producing some sort of a community event, helping someone else understand the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or, speaking back to some event that happens, right? It's your creative practice disrupts the norm, right? You documenting and telling your story disrupts the norm and changes the narrative and pushes for policy change as well. It all works together. And I think there's what I don't want to happen is this amazing new support for artists, arts institutions, smaller arts organizations, grassroots organizations, folks who do work on the ground. I don't want folks to lose their practice, right? Because there are all these additional opportunities and resources to do projects, right? That, seemingly give you more visibility.
I think that the kind of work I'm doing individually, as well as the work I'm doing with other groups, other, say, filmmakers, and also particularly I think about Funny Asian Women Collective, FOC, which is the group I co-founded, a comedy group I co-founded. I think a lot of the work that we're doing is really important because we're centering and humanizing Asian American stories. This is terrible to say, but it's the truth. I think one of the best things that came out of the pandemic and all the anti-Asian hate violence was our visibility, right? Like I said, I've witnessed. I live in this in-between space, so I remember what it felt like. I still know what it felt like to look at the TV and go to see movies and not see Asians and Asian Americans, or else every time we see them, they're victimized, right? Sex objects, or they're gangsters, or they're communists, or something. They're less than human, and I think that's dangerous. I think that when those are the only images that you see, those it's so easy to see us as perpetual foreigners.
I'm of two minds of it. I think theater has gone through a lot of changes, and in some ways not enough change. I think American theater has been based on white supremacy for a long time, and in the last 2 years, in the racial reckoning, things have started to change a little bit quicker. I think that theaters and funders have started to really pay attention and be more intentional about the anti-racist theater they're creating. And I also think it's a learning curve. So while I'm happy to see more stories being written by BIPOC playwrights and more BIPOC theater artists on stages around the country, I do think that sometimes the statements are just statements. Sometimes there's a longer, I'd say process, a longer arc to, especially predominantly white institutions, incorporating true anti-racist practices into their theater processes.
The third question dealt with the future. Where do they think our arts is heading, and where do they believe it should be heading?
For me, I've been when I was actually born in Thailand, and so when we came, we were in the projects, and so for me, I've lived it through most of my life, seeing how there was an accessibility to arts, and so now I see there's actually a change, like especially in the schools where they start adding programs. But I think for me, like I do see like a change in funding for the arts, which is nice. But I feel like there needs to be more, and as compared to like other countries that actually the government funds dancers as well, or like even the arts. And I don't see as much as here in the U.S. or Minnesota.
I'm really interested in Black folks, particularly, but BIPOC communities as a whole, really thinking about the ways that we can resource ourselves and become less dependent on philanthropy for art making and art practice. I'm super interested in that. That's where I think we should be going. We should be patroning our own events and shows. We should be resourcing the folks in our community, the arts leaders and artists in our community ourselves as well, right? In tandem. And in terms of philanthropy, I'm really interested in, or where I hope we go is more of this, more of this sort of larger gift giving to individual artists specifically, not just to smaller organizations or organizations who've been underrepresented, but to individual artists to make an impact on the work that they're doing. That's where we should be going.
In my family, and I think in Native communities more generally, we have a really weird relationship with art collectors, with art museums, with museums in general, because so much of what lies in museums globally that comes from our people was either stolen or it was purchased under duress. That's what really brought me to this event, this phenomenon of non-fungible token art. But now, as I sit here as a collector, as a curator, and also as an artist now within the scene, one of the things that really strikes me is the idea of NFT as a medium, not just as a way to track provenance or a digital signature on a piece. It's a way instead, like when the code itself becomes part of the artwork. And there's definitely artists that are really pushing that and really making huge waves at it. And it's fascinating to watch and really fun to see how it goes. And so for me, if I'm talking about like where I think that space should go, I would really, especially in terms of my own work, I'm still struggling with how to apply like Indigenous weaving tech, porcupine quill work tech to coding, to make the code itself part of the artwork, part of the piece that's generated.
I think there needs to be more avenues for people to get work produced, but at least there are more avenues than there ever was before. And I think that because people's identities are much more complicated, and we're recognizing that, whether it be your whatever nationality, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, even where you're located. Like, I think it's edgy to be a Midwestern artist because we're not part of the conversation, right? So people are always surprised, like, there are people of color in the Midwest. I'm like, yeah, there are, So I think even having BIPOC artists from the Midwest inserting themselves into the larger conversation about what it means to be BIPOC is also edgy, and it needs to happen, right? I think for far too long we've had so much, as one of my friends put it, so much like coastal elitism, right? But I also think people are getting more creative.
I think the last 2 years have been very intense for the theater industry particularly, and also for the country as a whole, because we've been in a pandemic for over 2 years. The murder of Mr. George Floyd propelled a huge anti-racist movement forward, and protests in the fight against anti-Blackness. And so I feel like the theater industry has done a lot of soul searching in how we'd like to move forward in a more equitable and anti-racist way. And so when people talked about, oh, we want to go back to theater, we want to go back to theater. I think a lot of BIPOC artists and theater companies said, well, no, we don't want to do theater the way we've always done it.
So I think where we should be going is art culture everywhere, right? All over the place, you know. We want color everywhere, you know. Multicultural, you know, we're living in a place where, you know, there's people from all over the world. I think where we need to head is to have a community that is a lot more inclusive, that we need to incorporate all the aspects of life, right? We have social justice. We need to incorporate social justice in art and culture. We need to tie all these things together to become a stronger community, right? We cannot just have art and not activism.
From MPR News, APM Research Labs, and Art Hounds, we want to thank you for engaging with arts and artists in Minnesota, diversity, data, and discussion. This is a piece provided to us by Theater Mu and Jungle Theater's co-production of Cambodian rock band.